Good morning. Good morning. I am Connie Ordway, a member of our Board of Trustees, and I welcome you to this Sunday service at the UU Church of Columbia. I am a mature white woman with salt and pepper hair and glasses, she, her pronouns, wearing an eggplant blouse and black harem pants today. We are a congregation of many beliefs, striving together to embody courageous love, radical welcome, and deep connection. And we are so glad you are here. Welcome. We usually offer in fact offer a live stream of our services. It was an issue for a while, and extend a warm welcome to those of you online. We strive to make our worship accessible, and you can find an accessible order of service with hymn lyrics included at our homepage, uucomo.org. There are listening assistance devices with our ushers near the entrance to the sanctuary, and if you're on Zoom, you can click the CC button for subtitles. For those of you with us in person, masks are now welcomed, celebrated, optional. We'd like to particularly welcome any visitors among us this morning and invite you to find our Visitor Connect book in the greeting area or in the chat. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Children and babies are always welcome in worship, and we also have nursery care for our youngest ones in the lower level. Children of all ages are invited to participate throughout today's multi-generational service.
Good morning. Good morning. And happy Halloween. I'm George Grimhowell, your intern minister. I'm a middle-aged plus man with very little hair, wearing a black jacket over a maroon shirt today. No costume, I'm afraid. I'm scary enough. Come, come, all ye spirits. Come, all ye witches and warlocks. Come, all ye seekers of thrills and chills. Come, ye monsters and dragons, ghosts and goblins, spiders and serpents, black cats and pointy hats. Bring your fears and trembles, your spells and your smells. Summon now your tricks and your treats. Your broomsticks are welcome here.
And let us now light our cauldron of flame, which represents the magic of our community. As George lights our chalice, will you please join me in the words of affirmation printed in your order of service? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And I am the Reverend Molly Hausch-Gordon, the minister of this congregation. This morning, I am wearing a very sequined witch's hat with lightning bolt earrings and a spiderweb scarf, looking very spooky today.
Good morning. I'm Jamila Batchelder, the Director of Religious Education here. I am a middle-aged white woman with dark blonde hair and glasses, and I am currently sticking with my family's theme for Halloween of artwork, and I'm going as a George O'Keeffe painting. So I have two large poppies on top of my head, a red scarf, and a black turtleneck sweater. I love Halloween. I love it as an opportunity to sit with fear, to enjoy fear, to get comfortable with fear. We don't get many opportunities in our life to just face it and revel in it and play with it. So this Sunday, we're going to do a lot of joyful playing with fear. So I want to begin with a centering that my child helped me write. He's late here, so he doesn't get to hear it. But I want you to close your eyes and imagine yourself in a dark and spooky hallway. Murky shadows dance about in hidden corners. Every shadow could hold an unseen danger. The air is cool, and you feel a draft ruffle your hair. You hear a door slam shut somewhere behind you. It was probably just the wind. Or was it? You hear the floorboards creak somewhere behind you. It was probably just the settling of an old house. Was it? Another shadow floats across the wall. It was probably just the moon through the trees. Or was it? You begin to walk forward. Your footfall's the only sound in the lonely silence of the house. A part of you wants to turn and run away, but you continue, step by step. Your heart is beating wildly, the hairs on your arms standing on end. Yet you continue to the end of the hall. In front of you is a door with dusty cobwebs stretching across. It appears to not have been opened in years. You hear a rustling noise on the other side. What could be behind this door? It could be anything. Woo! Will you join me in making a spooky sound as we experience the thrill of sitting with fear? Do you have the courage to see what is beyond the door? We'll leave it here for now and visit again later in the service. Know that whatever unknown we face, we can choose whether to approach it with fear or with curiosity, with compassion, and even with joy. Let us sing our centering song together.
Joy, joy is my guide. I move with life. We're going to tell a story now.
Can you lend me your ears? I promise I'll give them back to you later. This is a monster story. It's a story about ferocious animals, but also lovable animals. It's a very special story from a very special place. The story is called The Monster That Grew Small. And it's an old folk tale from the area of Egypt and Ethiopia. Do you all know anything about Egypt? You know, the Nile. The Nile might be in the, what'd you say? You're in denial. Well, there is the Nile River, and the Nile River has things called cataracts on them, which are places where the water is shallow and you can cross more easily. And they used to measure the distance by which cataract you were near. So that's when that gets mentioned in the story. And the story also tells about a hare. Does anyone know what a hare is? Not the hair on your head. It's like a rabbit, yeah. I want to give you something you can do while you listen. If every time you hear the word hare, you can make a little bouncing hare. And every time you hear the word crocodile, you can. And every time you hear them mention a snake or a serpent, you can go. And every time they mention spiders, you can go spider hands. And every time they mention a monster, you can go. Okay. So let's get going in the story. I have my assistants. We're doing it all together here. Far to the south, beyond the third cataract, there was a small village where a certain boy lived with his uncle. This uncle was known as the Brave One because he was a hunter, and he killed such a lot of large animals, and he was very horrid to his nephew because he thought the boy was a coward. And the boy believed what he was told, for was his uncle not the brave one, the mighty hunter? Whenever the boy had to go down to the river, he thought the crocodiles would eat him. And when he went to the forest, he thought the shadows concealed snakes and hairy spiders that waited under the leaves to pounce on him. The place that always felt especially dangerous was on the path down to the village. Whenever he had to go along it, he used to run. One day, when he came to the most frightening part of the path, he heard a voice crying out from the shadows of the darkest trees. He put his fingers to his ears and ran even faster, but he could still hear the voice. His fear was very loud, but even so, he could hear his heart, and it said to him,
Perhaps the owner of that voice is much more frightened than you are. You know what it feels like to be frightened. Don't you think you ought to help?
So he took his fingers out of his ears, and he clenched his fist to make himself feel braver, and he plunged into the deep shade, thrusting his way between thorn trees in the direction of the cries. He found a hare caught by the leg in a tangle of creepers, and the hare said to him,
I was so very frightened, but now you have come. I am not afraid anymore. You must be very brave to have come alone into the forest.
The boy released the hare and quieted it between his hands, saying,
Oh, I am not brave at all. In my village, they call me Miobi, the frightened one. I should never have dared to come here, only I heard you calling.
Why are you frightened? What are you frightened of?
I am frightened of the crocodiles who live in the river, and the snakes and the spiders that lie in wait for me whenever I go out. But most of all, I am frightened of the things that rustle in the palm thatch over my bedplace. My uncle says they are only rats and lizards, but I know they are far worse than that.
What you want is a house with walls 3 cubits thick, where you could shut yourself away from all the things you fear.
Oh, I don't think that would do any good. For if there were no windows, I should be afraid of not being able to breathe. And if there were windows, I should always be watching them, waiting for things to creep in and devour me.
The hare seemed to have stopped being frightened. Niobe said to it,
Now that you know I'm not all that brave, I don't suppose I'll seem very much like a protector. But if you'd feel that I'm better than nothing, I'll carry you home if you tell me where you live.
I live in the moon, so you can't come home with me yet. But I should like to give you something to show you how grateful I am for your kindness. What would you like best in the world to have?
Well, I should like to have courage. But I suppose that's one of those things that can't be given.
I can't give it to you, but I can tell you where to find it. The road that leads you there, you will have to follow alone. But when your fears are the strongest, look up at the moon, and I will tell you how to overcome them.
Then the hare told Niobe about the road he must follow. And we're going to pause there in the story and take some time for a little game. This game, and if you're at home, you might want to go grab yourself a piece of paper. You all should have a paper on your seat. This game is called Exquisite Corpse. Have any of you ever played this game? All right, I'll tell you how to do it. So you'll notice that the paper is folded into threes, and we have lots of pencils, colored pencils and plain pencils. And turn it so that the side with the number 1 is facing up. And what we're going to do in 3 parts with 3 different people, we are going to draw a creature. 1 part will be the head, 1 part the body, and 1 part the feet or tails. So right now we will start with drawing a head. And I want to give you a little prompt to try drawing something that's perhaps a little different, but worthy of our care, like the hare in the story that Niobe had to save. And you have about 2 to 3 minutes. About 30 more seconds. You can continue drawing if you want to during the story. My one last direction is that you extend the neck ever so slightly onto panel 2 so that whoever draws next will know what to connect to. Okay. Let's return to our story. The next morning, before his uncle was awake, the boy set out on his journey. His only weapon was a dagger the hare had given him. It was long and keen and pale as the moonlight. Soon the road came to a wide river. Then Niobe was very frightened, for in it there floated many crocodiles who watched him with their evil little eyes. But he remembered what the hare had told him, and after looking up at the moon, he shouted at them.
If you want to be killed, come and attack me.
And then he plunged into the river, his dagger clutched in his hands, and began to swim to the far bank. Much to the crocodiles' surprise, they found themselves afraid of him. To try to keep up their dignity, they said to one another,
He is too thin to be worth the trouble of eating.
and they shut their eyes and pretended not to notice him. So Niobe crossed the river safely and went on his way. After a few more days, he saw 2 snakes, each so large they could have swallowed an ox without any pain. Both speaking at the same time, they said loudly,
If you come one step further, we shall immediately eat you.
Niobe was very frightened, for snakes were one of the things he minded most. He was to the point of running away, but then he looked up at the moon, and he knew what the hare wanted him to do.
Oh, large and intelligent serpents! A boy so small as myself could do no more than give one of you a satisfactory meal. Half of me wouldn't be worth the trouble of digesting. Haven't you better decide between yourselves by whom I am to have the honor of being eaten?
Sensible. I will eat you myself. Oh, no, you won't. He is mine. Nonsense. You had that rich merchant. He was so busy looking after his gold that he never noticed you until you got him by the legs. Well, what about the woman who was admiring her face in the mirror? You said she was the tenderest meal you'd had for months. The merchant was since that. He wasn't. He was. Wasn't. Was.
While the serpents were busy arguing over which of them should eat Niobe, he had slipped past without their noticing and was already out of sight. So that morning, neither of the serpents had even a small breakfast. Niobe felt so cheerful that he began to whistle. For the first time, he found himself enjoying the shapes of trees and the colors of flowers instead of wondering what dangers they might be concealing. Soon, he came upon the site of a village, and even from the distance, he could hear the sound of lamentation as he walked down the street. No one took any notice of him, for the people were too busy moaning and wailing. The cooking fires were unlit, and the goats were bleeding because no one had remembered to milk them. Babies were crying because they were hungry, and a small girl was yelling because she'd fallen down and cut her knee, and her mother wasn't even interested. So we'll stop there and get ready to do the next phase of our story. So what I want you to do is turn so that panel 2 is up, so no one is seeing your first drawing, and hand it to somebody else. Who hasn't seen, well, find someone else to add. And now you will add the body. And the addition I would like to give prompt to the body is Something scary and spooky. From neck to what would be legs or tails. Yeah. All right. We will return to the story. Niobe went to the house of the headman, man who he found sitting cross-legged with ashes on his head, his eyes shut and his fingers in his ears. Niobe had to shout very loud to make him hear. Then the old man opened one ear and one eye and growled.
What do you want?
Nothing. I wanted to ask what you wanted. Why is your village so unhappy?
You'd be unhappy too if you were going to be eaten by a monster.
Who's going to be eaten? You?
Me and everyone else, even the goats. Can't you hear them bleating?
Niobe was too polite to suggest that the goats were only bleating because no one had milked them. So he said to the headman,
There seems to be quite a lot of people in your village. Could you kill the monster if you all helped?
Impossible. Too big, too fierce, too terrible. We all agreed on it.
Well, what does the monster look like?
They say it has the head of a crocodile, and the body of a hippopotamus, and the tail of a very fat snake, but it's sure to be even worse. Don't talk about it.
If you will tell me where the monster lives, I will try to kill it for you.
Perhaps you are wise, for then you will be eaten first and won't have very long to think about it. The monster lives in a cave at the very top of the mountain. The smoke you can see comes from its fiery breath. You will be cooked before you're eaten.
Niobe looked up at the moon and knew what the hare wanted him to say.
I will go up the mountain and challenge the monster.
Climbing the mountain took him a long time, but when he was halfway up, he could see the monster quite clearly, basking at the mouth of its cave, its fiery breath whooshing out of its nostrils. It looks about 3 times as big as the royal barge, which is very big, even for a monster.
I won't look at it again until I have climbed all the distance between me and the cave. Otherwise, I might feel too much like running away, and I won't be able to go on climbing.
When next he looked at the monster, he expected it to be much larger than it had seemed farther away. But instead, it looked quite smaller, only the size of 1 royal barge instead of the size of 3. The monster saw him and it snorted angrily, and the snort flared down the mountainside and scorched Niobe. He ran back rather a long way before he could make himself stop. Now, the monster seemed to have grown larger again. It was quite 3 times as large as a royal barge, perhaps 4. Niobe said to himself,
This is very curious indeed. The farther I run away from the monster, the larger it seems. And the nearer I am to it, the smaller it seems. Perhaps if I were very close, it might be a reasonable size for me to kill it with my dagger.
So that his eyes would not be hurt by the fiery breath, he shut his eyes. And so that he would not drop his dagger, he clasped it very tightly. And he would not have time to start being frightened. He ran up the mountain as fast as he could run to face the monster. When he opened his eyes, he couldn't see anything. Nothing that needed killing. The cave seemed empty, and he began to think he must have run the wrong direction. But then he felt something hot touch his right foot. He looked down, and there was the monster. It was as small as a frog. He picked it up in his hand and scratched its back. It was no more than comfortably warm to hold, and it made a small, friendly sound, halfway between a purr and the simmering of a cooking pot. Niobe thought,
Poor little monster. It will feel so lonely in this enormous cave. It might make a nice pet, and its fiery breath would be useful for lighting my cooking fire.
So he carried it carefully down the mountain, and it curled up in his hand and went to sleep. So now we're going to draw our third part. Make sure you extend your torso ever so slightly onto panel 3, and then hand it to a third person to put on a legs or tail. And my prompt for this one is to draw something surprising or perhaps a little silly. Just a few more moments. And now we will finish our story. When Niobe saw the villagers and the villagers saw Niobe, at first they thought they must be dreaming, for they had been so sure the monster would kill him. Then they acclaimed him as a hero, saying, "Honor to the mighty hunter! He is the bravest of all, he who has slain the monster." Niobe felt very embarrassed. As soon as he could make himself heard above the cheering, he said,
But I didn't kill it. I brought it home as a pet.
They thought it was only modesty becoming to a hero. And before they would believe him, he had to explain how the monster had only seemed so big as long as he was running away. But the nearer he got to it, the smaller it grew, until at last, when he was standing beside it, he could pick it up in his hand. The people crowded round to see the monster. It woke up, yawned, a small puff of smoke, and it began to purr. A little girl asked Niobe, "What's its name?"
I don't know. I never asked it.
I have many names. Some call me famine, and some pestilence. But the most pitiable of humans give me their own names.
It yawned again and then added,
But most people call me what might happen.
"And now, it's time to return to that spooky hallway. It's time to open the door. Close your eyes and imagine it in front of you. Feel your hand grasping the knob, cool and hard beneath your fingers. Summon the courage to turn it and feel the latch click open. And then push against that heavy door and feel it swing wide. And you have created what is on the other side. Let's open up our exquisite corpse drawing and see what we've created. Who is this creature? What's its name? What's its story? What's it come to share with you? And can you welcome it into our time together?
So I have a question for you. How many people have ever watched a scary movie? How many of you have gone to a haunted house? How many have read a scary book? Who has ever gone trick-or-treating and knocked on the door of a big, scary old house? How did you know who or what would be on the other side of the door? Some people just enjoy the thrill of being scared. Sometimes it can be fun if you know the scary is make-believe, or if you're with people who make you feel safe, or if you have a magic rabbit to protect you. But sometimes in life, we have to put ourselves in scary situations, even when we don't know what's going to happen. Often we do it because there's a chance for a sweet treat waiting on the other side of our fear. And sometimes maybe we just like to know that we're brave enough and strong enough to conquer the fear. So maybe life in the end is like trick-or-treating. We knock on doors some known, some unknown. And we seek out monsters. We summon our bravery. And then we find out there are wonderful rewards waiting in store. May you find yourself to be brave, and may you find sweet rewards, the rewards that come from putting ourselves out there. And may you know that even in the scariest of times, that you are not alone.